Vancouver adoring fans out there. We get together to do this podcast every few weeks, and we try to batch 3-4 episodes. Especially in busy season, we're getting busy, so it's difficult to get me and Jamie, or me and Monica, or Monica and Jamie together. And it seems like every single time we get together, so let's say every 3 to 4 weeks, we are trying to learn and then announce different policy changes and tax changes and interest rate changes. And it seems like every single time we get together, there is something good or bad that is adjusting. And so we are taking it upon ourselves to be the what used to be the news, I guess. And it's wild. We're a couple months into 2024. Real estate activity is picking up a lot. And in the last few weeks, there has been a number of changes. So today we'll kind of go through them. We will share our thoughts on how this will affect market conditions, if at all. We'll share who this is going to benefit or hurt. But there's a lot, so let's go. Okay, so first of all, the foreign buyer ban a few weeks ago was extended for 2 years to January 2027. So foreign buyer history, I will let Monica talk in a second, I promise. The foreign buyer tax came in 2016, in the middle of 2016 at 15% overnight. It was implemented very poorly, but it was implemented. A couple of years later, 2018, I believe, 2018-19, their tax increased to 20%. And as of January 1st, 2023, there was a 2-year ban put into place, and that has been extended for 2 years to 2027. Monica, thoughts on foreign buyer bans?
Well, as everybody knows, we have a housing crisis in BC, of course. Lots of other areas in Canada are suffering because of housing. So that's why. That is why one of the main reasons why they started this foreign buyers tax in the first place all the years ago. They've had this tax. Has it really affected the real estate market? In my opinion, not really. And the hundreds of transactions that I've done since they've had this foreign buyers tax, I've had it affect one person. They ended up not buying because of the tax. So the foreign buyers tax, I would love to know actually how much money the government makes from this tax. Do you know, Denny?
Well, there's no tax anymore.
They just can't do it.
My guess is it was very little. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if they would even publish accurate numbers on those things because they want to make it look good. I'm not 100% sure. But in hindsight, looking back a handful of years when this ban
Yep, it's ban
came in, do you think it was because they were already considering the immigration numbers moving forward? Because it seems like immigration numbers just continue to increase, and as some way to kind of counteract the perception from Canadians. You know what I mean? Last year, over 1 million people came into the country, and if all of them are allowed to buy homes, then yes, that hurts Canadians looking to buy their first home and upsize and all those things as real estate prices increase.
It's honestly really hard to say what the government is thinking when they do a lot of these things. Yes, I'm sure that a portion of it was to help alleviate the stress that residents and citizens of Canada are already feeling in the housing market, and the bias feelings that can come up when you see a lot of immigrants come in and it's already difficult with housing for the people that are here. So I'm sure that had a large play in them deciding to ban foreign buyers from purchasing property. At the end of the day, we're all skirting around the same problem, which is a housing crisis, and the foreign ban doesn't seem to be helping. We've heard a lot of other really big announcements in the last few days that are red flags that the problem isn't going anywhere, and that there's a lot of that help that the country and certainly the province of BC needs in terms of housing. And another big issue is there aren't even places for them to rent. Like if immigrants are coming in and foreign students and all these, people are coming in, there's really not even any place for them to rent. And there's no short-term places for them to stay while they're looking for rentals. So it's a really, really deep-seated issue that we have. And I really don't see an end in sight unless there's some major, major changes. And major changes in that people spread out throughout the country, not just changes to housing policy and how we build housings in areas like Vancouver, but there's going to have to be a moment in time where people in Canada decide, okay, we need to spread out. We need to, start really concentrating on other micro communities and build those up because the ban on foreign buyers hasn't done anything. Like we already had it for a few years, like you said, and now we're extending it. Why are we extending it? Because there's still a problem. That's why we're extending it.
It's easy for a Canadian person that is not maybe involved in real estate to see this as a benefit to Canadians, to see, okay, great, we are focusing on only people that have Canadian citizenship or permanent residency can buy homes here. This should help make housing more affordable. The problem is we're just moving that sector of people into a different area, which is rentals. So like Greater Vancouver alone last year had 154,000 people move here. 154,000. My guess is most of them don't have permanent residency and are not citizens of Canada, obviously. Where are they going? They're going into the rental market. So it's not a surprise that rental rates or rental vacancy rates are below 1% in Greater Vancouver. It's not a surprise that rental rates continue to climb. It's not a surprise that like we did a podcast last time we got together talking about rental rates, and North Vancouver, a one bedroom is $2,800 a month now, and Port Moody, where we are right now, like one bedroom on the low end is probably $2,500 a month. Like these are approaching unaffordable. Well, they are unaffordable rates for a lot of like young couples and young families, but we're pushing people towards rentals, but not providing more rentals and actually making it more difficult for investors to purchase properties and rent them out, which I think is an issue. But we have a lot to talk about in this change section and what has happened in the last few weeks. So maybe let's move on from the foreign buyer stuff. I think overall it's an interesting idea. I think there are other countries in the world that have bans or big taxes on foreign investment, which, okay, I understand, but it doesn't solve the problem. It just pushes the problem to a different area, which is rentals. And we're seeing that kind of, it's kind of exploding on the rental side, that rental rates are continuing to increase, even though they are very high.
Well, we can't even really look to other countries as models for what to do about our problem. Our problem is very unique, and we're a large geographic but small in terms of population country who continues to let people in. So our problem is quite unique. We don't really have a lot of other countries that we can look to and say, okay, what did they do? How did they do this? It's a very unique and very difficult to manage problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is quite interesting that a lot of people moving to Canada don't know about this foreign buyer ban too. Yeah. Like I met with someone who's moving here from Scotland a week ago, and they reached out. We met for coffee, and they're talking about purchasing a property. I said, and so the first question is, do you have permanent residency yet, or have you like started going down that process? They said, oh no, they we've looked into it. The company that is pulling us here for a job has kind of shared some info, but it's probably 2 to 3 years away. Okay, well you're going to be renting for 2 to 3 years. Really? Why is that?
And honestly, that can be very detrimental to families who are prepared to purchase at that time. Mm-hmm. They could blow through their savings trying to rent and lose their deposit. Like it's a complete, it's a big problem. Yeah.
Also, like part of the problem is there's just not any rentals available. Like this is a family who has 2 kids. So they're not wanting to rent a 1-bedroom condo. They're wanting to rent like a 3 or 4 bedroom home or townhome. And the availability of that in the areas that we were talking about, Tri-Cities, they're few and far between. They don't come up very often. And when they do, they're very competitive because of how many people are looking for that kind of stuff. But okay, moving on from the foreign buyer ban. So the budget was announced about a week ago. and a couple. Let's start with an optimistic, exciting new change. This is something that has been outdated for years. This is
We've talked about it on this podcast.
man.
I guess like maybe 2 years ago.
When
something like that.
I started real estate 2014, and this was the first time buyer threshold at $500,000. That was the threshold. And when I started, I would say a 1-bedroom condo in New West was in the range of let's say like a nicer, newer 1-bedroom condo in New West, 275, 300,000. Going into Burnaby, probably 350 to 400. Getting into Vancouver, you could still get pretty decent options under 500. Those numbers don't exist anymore, Monica.
And haven't for a long time. Yeah.
This is the first time homebuyer exemption on property transfer tax. So I think this is a really good move that has been dated for a very, very long time. But what the new threshold is, so if you purchase a property as a first-time homebuyer under $835,000, the first $500,000, you are exempt from property transfer tax. So what that means is there's a savings of $8,000 of tax. Is this life-changing to people that are buying an $800,000 condo? No, this is not life-changing. The government, however, has made it sound like this is absolutely solving the affordability crisis.
I'm trying to be positive about this. This is fantastic. Like $8,000, congrats. Like that's a good one.
Think about this, right? Let's say you're buying a newer 1-bed and den in Vancouver. You're probably spending $750K. Yeah. So this $8,000 savings is 1%.
Yeah.
It's a 1% savings. Yeah. And it is something.
It's definitely something. As long as I've been in real estate, when I have a first-time home buyer purchasing, they are budgeting down to the dollar. Yeah. So yes, $8,000. Again, like you said, $8,000 of $800,000 is 1%, but it's something. Yeah.
And then there's these numbers. I would be very curious to talk to the person who came up with these numbers because it's strange. 835,000 is the new threshold, and then sliding scale up to 860. Why not 850 and 900? Why not a little bit more round numbers? I don't know the exact answer to that.
Yeah, they must.
But it's a great question.
Yeah, they must. I'm assuming they're going off of some averages that they've concocted. Yeah,
it's quite interesting. The way that it seems like municipalities work is like, solve. There's been very little solving recently. Let's deal with something today. Let's not look forward 5 years. Let's not look forward 50 years. I'm talking about like infrastructure in Greater Vancouver. Big issue. But same thing with this kind of thing, like $835,000. Like I feel like in 2 years from now, it's going to need to be completely adjusted again. Why not like project into the future a little bit of where home prices are going, and why not round up to 850?
Yeah.
Anyway, the other thing on the tax savings, so newly built home exemption. If you're, as of a few weeks ago, if you were buying a new construction home that is going to be your primary residence, up to $750,000, you are exempt from property transfer tax. That that threshold now has gone up to 1.1 million.
That's pretty decent. I mean, when you're buying new construction, you're paying GST. So I know a lot of my clients in the past have just been pretty furious with the government when they buy new construction because you're getting hammered with GST. Yeah. You're paying property transfer tax on a property. The way that a lot of people see it when they're buying a new construction is you're paying property transfer tax on a property that no one has ever owned. So you're not transferring ownership. You're just buying it from the developer. So a lot of people feel that was a scam. So I think that, alleviating that new construction property transfer tax just seems fair. Yeah.
It is interesting though, like 1.1 million in Vancouver proper still doesn't get you much. Like you're getting a 1 and den. You're getting a 2-bedroom in East Van. You're not getting a townhome. It's not like this is going to be utilized by upsizing families.
There is a new development in Vancouver where a little condo that's probably around, let's say, 560 square feet, it is going for around $1 million, but you do get a free Porsche with it. So if you spend $1 million, you're going to get a new condo, a free Porsche, and you're not going to pay any transfer tax.
If you move into the condo.
If you move in, yeah, you have to actually move into it.
Okay, next. I mean, I think this is the last big change in the last few weeks, but the anti-flipping tax. So this is a really interesting one that I think there's going to be some contradicting point of view. So this could be quite entertaining. Yeah. The anti-flipping tax, as of next year, right? I believe it starts January 1st, 2025.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
So if you purchase a home and sell it within 12 months of purchasing, you will be susceptible to a 20% tax on the lift. So if your property goes up 100K, or if you do renos and sell at over and above what you paid for the home, you will pay a 20% tax on the lift. And there's a sliding scale from 12 to 24 months. There are some exemptions for obviously life-changing moments. Someone gets a job out of town and has to sell, or whatever, the death in the family, whatever that is. There are exemptions, but it's obviously geared towards the investor style person that is purchasing a home, doing cosmetic renos, looking to make a profit and selling quickly in the 12 months. Monica, what are your thoughts?
I have thoughts on this.
Okay. I have a lot of thoughts on this.
As always, a lot of these announcements seem like they're out there to help, the public. This one I find a little bit interesting, because the flippers that we see, they're usually not making like an enormous amount of money on the flip. They're people that have it dialed in when it comes to knowing how to do strata or condo construction. They know the right stuff to do, how to get approvals, renting the elevators, all that kind of stuff. They have it all really, really dialed in. They purchase the home, they get in there and they update it, and then they sell it within usually 3 to 6 months, or the next time the market is a little bit warm, right? So I think I've seen on just your run-of-the-mill kind of like middle-class condo, I would say I've seen, maybe a $70,000 to $150,000, depending on what kind of property it is and depending on what the market is doing. I've seen maybe a $75,000 to $150,000 profit, and sorry, that profit isn't including whatever the heck they paid to for the flip. So, is it stopping those people from making money? Sure. Is that really the problem? No. They're usually holding the property for like 3 to 6 months. Like I said, they're renovating it and then they're selling it right back. So it's not like these flippers are a problem, in my opinion. They're buying the properties, they're improving the properties, and then they're selling the properties back out in the open market. So do I find that to be a problem? Is that holding people back from owning properties? No.
I posted a video on Instagram as soon as this came out, just sharing my thoughts of whether or not I think this is a good idea and whether or not I think it's actually going to help people. And I don't think it is. And I haven't heard one argument to say that this is, again, these are really big perception things for a lot of people that maybe are not super involved in real estate. They think, okay, these corrupt developer type people or these investor type people are taking advantage of a market that continues to go up and taking advantage of Canadians and young families and young couples that are trying to buy their first home. They're making real estate more competitive because they're buying all these homes and they're putting in $50K and making $280 billion. Like, this is not the reality.
No.
On that video on Instagram, I mean, maybe I'm just getting a little more notoriety locally because I'm getting
Denny's
trolled
going
now.
viral,
no,
guys.
I'm getting trolled. I had someone pretty fired up in the DMs talking about like exactly what I just said. That's the perception from a lot of people out there, I think. Media has kind of pushed that on people, unfortunately, is that investors are just taking advantage of Canadians through real estate. And I think the number they quoted was over 10% of property sales in Greater Vancouver were flipping. And my immediate reaction was, you got the wrong information, man.
Yeah, and also if they're counting flipping as anything that's been sold within 2 years, sure, but a lot of those properties weren't purchased for the intention of flipping.
Yeah.
They're just life changes, right?
So BCREA came out with something as soon as this was, just to kind of educate a little bit. And according to their statistics, less than 2% of homes are bought and sold within 2 years. So this is like a really small percentage of the market, first of all. But second of all, we need to consider the long-term horizon here and what is actually happening in Greater Vancouver. With all these density changes coming, basically the end of single-family zoning, where we've talked about this a bunch on the podcast, but potentially 3, 4, 6 units on single-family homes throughout Greater Vancouver. We've talked about the transit-oriented developments in these circles around the SkyTrains that will have much higher density. Single-family homes are going to continue to diminish. There's going to be less and less of them. So if we are disallowing, and again, I want to make this point that we need homes that have 3, 4 bedrooms for families.
Yes.
Developers are not building this type of product anymore, right?
Building micro apartments. That's it.
They're building really skinny stacked townhomes, right? That doesn't work for the family of 5, right? There's not enough space in there. So we still need single family homes. And what these style of investors are doing, again, I'm not saying this is, there are situations where investors are taking advantage, for sure. But what's the alternative? If we completely eliminate this market, and by taxing people 20% on the lift, that essentially eliminates their profit margin. So they have zero incentive to actually do this type of thing now. But here's an example. Let's say a 1940s, 1950s single family home that's 2,000 square feet, 2,200 square feet in Coquitlam or Port Moody or Poco, anywhere in the Tri-Cities, is original condition, essentially land value, essentially a teardown. How many young families, one, have the means to do this, but want to take on a big project where they spend $250,000, they buy a single family home that's in an original condition that is not well maintained, do this level of work, don't live in the home for 6 to 9 months, and then move into it? Very, very, very few. So this style of home that this investor type person is buying is not geared towards the young family. Like this is not people taking away opportunity from young families. This is people, what's the alternative? So an investor buys it, they put $200 or $150,000 in, and it goes from 1.5 to 1.8 or 1.9, which, it sounds funny saying this, but is still like on the lower end of single family homes in these neighborhoods.
But we're also forgetting that they are adding value to this home. They're adding their expertise, professionalism, all of their knowledge on how to do this and what to do, permits, everything. They're adding value to it, and then they're selling it. They're taking on all the risk. They're having to purchase it first. They're taking on the risk that the market could change. There's a lot that goes into this recipe of a flipper making profit, and they do pay income tax just like everybody else on the income that they make on these properties. They're already paying for their profit.
So again, this is a small percentage of the market, but looking the other way, if this doesn't exist anymore, if there's no incentive for the contractors, the investors to do this type of a renovation, now that home, again, it's not going to a young family. Very rarely does a young family want to take on this $250,000 reno. It's going to a developer who is now knocking the house down and either building a new house that is very large, that goes from 1.5 million to like 3.2 million, which cuts out a lot of young families just based on affordability, or they are doing this new quadplex or sixplex that are building really small 800 square foot units that doesn't appeal to a young family. So I think there is a place for this flipper. We need these people. So the tax to me is almost harmful. And I get the perception of it. I get that like a lot of people, like this person that is DMing me on Instagram, think that this is like detrimental to society, that someone is buying a home, renovating it and selling it. But I think we need it. That's a second section of the market that is going to disappear, the updated 1950s home. Because when young families take over these homes, and they do, they're doing like piece by piece renos. They're not doing full renos. Developers often in these cases are doing all new electrical, all new windows, all new plumbing. They're potentially a roof if they need roofs. So they're like mechanically updating homes to a newer standard with cosmetic renos that now doesn't need to be touched for 20, 25 years.
Without knocking it down and repurposing it or dramatically changing the price point. Yeah.
Versus young families that go in due to financial restraints are often just, updating a bathroom, and then a few years later, new appliances, but they're not touching the mechanics of the home, which
often
date the home.
They don't have they don't have the expertise. They don't have the expertise or the cash to do it, the know-how, the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. Yeah. I don't like this one.
Monica doesn't like this one.
No.
It's
just because it doesn't affect anyone in the way that they think it does.
Yeah.
I like as insignificant as I think the property transfer tax savings are, it's still a clear savings. I can still say that, yes, someone is going to love this and it's going to help maybe somebody get into a little bit nicer of a home than they thought that they could. Maybe.
Yeah.
This one, I just don't see it really helping anyone. This anti-flippers, a lot of people are going to get around it. A lot of people are going to buy crappy homes that could have been flipped. And I don't see the value in this one at all.
Do investors go elsewhere? Or do you think they now just take time with the projects, maybe rent out the home for a year and a half, and then do the reno?
There'll be a few ways around it. I mean, flippers will start, like you said, they'll pivot their businesses to where they're, building new homes, or pivot their businesses to where they're, maybe approaching families before they sell to renovate to sell kind of situations. Like there'll be a few situations like that we see. But yeah, they'll have to pivot their businesses. I know a lot of people in our business. We know a lot of, little companies that kind of go around and do this. There's a few there's this old complex in Port Moody, really, really old complex, that the same company has bought a few townhomes and updated them. I mean, this complex was built in the 70s, and the renovations that I've seen that this company has done in this complex have been amazing. People love them. They love buying those renovated. It's a huge floor plan. It's a townhouse that's 2,000 square feet that went from linoleum floors to, nice vinyl and some tile and things like that. And we've had several clients buy in that complex, and they love it. They absolutely love that they're not paying quite the prices of the very nearby townhomes that are quite a bit newer, but they're getting a much larger floor plan, and it's nice and new. So it'll be sad to see that culture kind of stop, to be honest.
Anything other changes? I think that's all.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Until next week, we will.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about the $2 billion one will be on its own?
Let's quickly mention that. Yeah. You probably have done more research on that, so I'll let you intro it.
Sure. Yeah.
This is exciting.
Yeah. This is exciting. There was an announcement. Trudeau is pledging $2 billion in federal loans and funding for housing in BC. Also, the provincial government has pledged $2 billion in construction loans. And then the mayor of Vancouver has pledged $950 million. This is kind of a little bit unclear exactly how this $950 million is going to work, but he said the $950 million is to help keep the cost down, the cost of the purchase down. So I'm not really sure how he's going to do that, but that's what he said. The billions, the $4 billions are for construction loans. The $950 million from the city is to help keep the purchase cost down. So I'm not really sure how that's going to work. We were talking to producer Carl before the podcast started, and it's kind of funny to try to quantify and qualify how $2 billion is going to really work. Like, how is $2 billion going to matriculate into an actual home? I don't really know. I don't know.
Hold on a second. What was that word you just said?
Matriculate.
Can you define that?
Well, sure. How something is going to go from one thing and disperse and change a bunch and then come back into something else. Yeah.
Wow. Sounds like magic.
It is. It is magic. I mean, we're talking about $4 billion. It sounds like a lot when you first talk about it, but we've spoke about many developments and buildings in Vancouver that have cost anywhere from $350 million to $750 million for a building. And this was in the past. This isn't even construction cost today. So when you really think about a building costing $350, and this is on the low side, $350 million, how many buildings are really getting built? I don't know. And they said between 8,000 and 10,000 new residents between 8,000 and 10,000. I'm sorry, 2,000 residents is a big spread to me. They're also talking about co-ops and repurposing land that's city owned, whereas I think this is fantastic. And of this entire announcement, this is something that I actually really, really get behind, is there's a lot of city owned land that is absolutely useless, that's not doing anything. They've identified 20, and they just started, and they've identified 20 sites that could possibly be home to these new developments. 20 sites is a lot. And EB announced that they've already moved forward in 3 that we know of, that they've already released over the last few weeks. But a 4th site has just been identified in Yaletown. 112 residents are going to be built there. 20%, which is going to be around 22 residents, is going to be for low-income renters. And this is going to be a co-op. So co-ops are not something that we deal with a lot in residential resale. I'm really curious how that's going to work in Yaletown. There are quite a few actually in that little kind of pocket. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, $4 billion plus $950 million, all pledged to BC Housing. Trudeau soapboxed a little bit about how devastated he was that for decades the housing crisis has been ignored by past governments. And there's a lot of people that are upset that we're in the situation that we're in. And this is all geared towards, and the focus of this is for middle class ownership. There's not a lot of focus on low income. The only low income housing they talked about was low income rentals in that co-op. But they are really, really focused on the middle class with these new residents. They need people, they need like firefighters and teachers and police officers to be able to afford to live in the cities that they serve.
To be clear, this 8 to 10,000 estimated homes that they're going to be building, this is rental, correct?
No, not all. Some is resale. A big portion of it's resale. That's what the $950 million is supposed to keep the cost for people to be able to purchase down. And they said they are like really scrutinizing buyers and renters. They're looking at their income very closely, and it's very targeted. It's very targeted.
I mean, like, how do you monitor this, right? So let's say you have an income maximum. Let's say a household income of $200,000 to be able to qualify to purchase at this project. First of all, you're going to get like 250 million applications. So good luck dealing with that. Secondly, is there like some sort of covenant on title that you can't sell the property or something for a few years, or what?
That is why they're really trying to focus on co-ops, because co-ops have this ability to screen purchasers. And that's why they're trying to go the co-op route big time on this one, because they want to be able to screen who's purchasing it. And Trudeau did say...
Terrible, Carl. Write this down. Mark it in history. February 29th, 2024. This is a terrible idea.
Yeah, Trudeau
Co-ops
said that they're really targeting the middle class, and they're going to scrutinize every purchaser very closely. And that's why they're doing co-op. They, obviously, it's always going to be them, Denny.
This is so wild. Guys, this is wild. We need to be aware of all these wild statements that are made in policies like this. Like, we're going to throw $2 billion at this. Guess where that money's coming from? It's coming from our pockets, guys. It's taxpayer money. Yeah. We're going to build 10,000 new homes. Really? In what time frame? Yeah. Do you know how long it takes to build 10,000 new homes?
They're saying that they're going to try to speed up the process from 12 to 18 months in terms of getting the project started, in terms of it actually moving forward.
This is one of the things that I'm completely on board with, and one something that he's making moves. Let's give him that, right? One thing that he is really trying to push is the time frame that municipalities deal with to push a permit through. Right now in the city of Vancouver, it might be 18 to 24 months to get a permit. It's wild. So he's really trying to push that.
Yeah, he wants the project started within 12 to 18 months. He wants it like shovels in the ground. Yeah.
Right. But this is still like building 10,000 homes. Like, this might be a 15-year project, right? This is not happening tomorrow.
Yeah, no. Well, he doesn't want it to be a 15-year project. That's the point. He wants it done in 5 years, but we'll see.
Yeah, good luck.
We'll see what happens. There's also something else to kind of think about that I heard a few people bring up, is we're putting in essentially $4.9 billion.
Man, there's so many billions talked about today.
Do you know what we're dealing with right now, everyone? Inflation.
Hold on. I haven't heard that word. I haven't heard that word before.
We are dealing with inflation, and the government is talking about dumping $4.9 million into BC, or sorry, billion dollars into BC. I wonder if that is going to affect inflation numbers at all. And also, like, where are these tradespeople coming from and where are they staying? And like, there's a lot of really funny, once you start kind of peeling back the layers, like we don't have any rental housing for these tradespeople that are going to be building all of these homes. We don't have any place for them. We have no short-term housing at all because that's not even allowed. We don't have any rentals. We can't bring people in from other countries because they won't be able to buy because of the foreign buyer ban. Like, it's really funny when you start to pull back the layers. Like, how are we going to get the experts that we need to get this many projects done that quickly without bringing people in from the outside? That's what Canada does. We constantly bring people in because we don't have enough people here. So
the last thing I wanted to just like mention on this stuff is, okay, I think in the last, let's say, year and a half, the governments of all levels, maybe not municipal, but provincial and federal, have at least been talking about supply of housing. This is a good thing. There's going to be progress if people are talking about it and actually trying things, which they're trying a lot of things. But the numbers are getting farther and farther apart. This is something really important to talk about, right? So like the number, 8 to 10,000 new homes. My understanding was a lot of it was rental, but let's not focus on that right now. 8 to 10,000 new homes is great. They estimate 5 years. My guess is 10 to 15. Whatever that is, let's go somewhere in the middle, 7.5. Last year, there was 154,000 people that moved to Greater Vancouver. If that continues, let's say it's not that exact pace, but let's say 100,000 over the next 7 years. That's 700,000 people with 8,000 new homes. The issue is not getting better. It's not getting easier.
And it's kind
getting
of
farther
interesting.
apart.
It's interesting when you look at, the naughty list that came out a few months ago, where the BC or the housing ministry was basically like, these places aren't building enough fast enough. They're not even close. And they gave a bunch of markers of how much you needed to get yourself off the naughty list. And the 8 to 10,000 doesn't solve that. Doesn't even catch up to those numbers that they released. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Yeah, 8 to 10,000 is great. Again, like I don't want to say that this is like, I want to be positive about this. 8 to 10,000 homes is absolutely needed. Government, like the government offering $4 billion in construction loans is great, and they said that they're modeling it after other places like Seoul and even Whistler where this has worked. They say, yes, this has worked. We're going to try it here. Okay, great. But like, it needs to continue, and it needs to be in more areas than just Vancouver. Like, it needs to be happening in Burnaby. It needs to be happening in Coquitlam. It needs to be happening in a lot of areas, and it needs to continue to happen. It's a widespread issue. It's not just a Vancouver issue. It's a big issue in BC. So
it's a weird time right now because costs have gone up significantly in the last few years. And so the incentive for developers to go through with projects on land that they sit on doesn't make a lot of sense right now because of the resale prices. So a lot of them over the last couple of years have just held on to land and not started projects, which is putting us farther and farther behind. So something like this maybe incentivize the developer to actually start a project, which is good too when they're offering $4 billion worth of low interest financing to development companies. I just we'll see where this goes, but I just feel like we continue to be farther and farther behind. But let's end this on an optimistic, positive note that I do think it's a good thing that we are talking about this now. I've been a realtor for 10 years. The first 8, it just got completely ignored. And there was always other things that were the problem, right? It was the flippers. It was, the foreign buyers. It was like, it was never supply. And at least now they are talking about how to address supply.
Totally agree. Denny and I have sat in meetings in people's living rooms where we've brought up the topic of housing crisis when they're like, oh, we can't get into a place. And this was a few years ago. And the looks on their faces when we tell them that we're in a housing crisis was pretty funny because they blamed pretty much everything else besides the supply. And now people are finally talking about it. So that's something.